Howdy, I'm Tim.
Howdy y'all, I'm Matt. Today we're going to be talking about a commonly asked question: why are my Japanese maple leaves drooping? Now we're actually here in early April, and so we're going to talk about why, some possibilities that may be happening for this kind of time frame. And there's basically three main reasons why you may be encountering that in this early spring setting, two of which go together, but we'll break that down for you and we'll discuss why your Japanese maple leaves may be drooping.
So one of the first reasons why Japanese maple may be drooping is your plant may just be leafing out. If you're getting a tree that's coming from our place here in Western North Carolina and you're pulling out of a box, one, it's just leafing out, and two, it may be a little bit dry in the box itself. So you may want to give it some water, but it's natural for it to have a slight droop to it when they first leaf out, right, Matt?
Yeah, so when those leaves are first unfurling, they'll actually be curled downward, and that might be completely natural. So we'll throw that one out there as the bonus one, because those leaves may look curled downward, but there's nothing you can do to change that. That's Mother Nature. That's how the trees were created. They're going to unfurl and look like little hands oftentimes. And Brian put a picture up of that magic moon doing a fist bump last week. But they're going to kind of curl downward a little bit as those leaves start to unfurl, especially a lot of those larger leaf forms. They're going to look very, droopy or dangling at first, and it's going to look like a little hand just unfurling. Now, as long as those leaves are crisp and clean, that's perfectly natural. That is typical for a Japanese maple and their natural progression of how they leaf out.
And if they've leafed out in a box on the way to you in transit in the early spring, you may have a little bit of irregular growth. It may not be growing straight exactly, but don't worry, over time, the sun will actually straighten those limbs up or put them exactly weeping like they need to be doing.
Yeah, those will clean up in just a few weeks. You get those in some shade, let them reset a little bit, water them naturally, and you're looking just fine. Now, one of the main reasons that could be something that you want to watch out for in the early spring would be too much water or too little water. Now, we'll throw these into the same category. Too much water and too little water can actually cause your leaves to droop a little bit. Especially too much water. It can make kind of a droopy look on your Japanese maples. The leaves typically look a little almost watery. They look a little too overdone, and it's a telltale sign that the Japanese maple is getting too much water. Too little can look very similar, so we throw that in the same category, but you're going to be, 9 times out of 10, it's too much water in that garden is what the issue is.
And if it's been in transit to you, the plant could be drying out a little bit. So think about, hey, you want to give it some water whenever you get it out of the box, because that will make it perk up its leaves. But always do the finger test. Figure out if the plant needs water before you water it, because that will help you in figuring out if this is the situation, if it's too much water or too little water when it comes to your plant's leaves drooping.
Yeah, so number 2 here, we'll get into that your Japanese maple might have been hit by a frost. So frost can certainly make your leaves look very droopy. We had some frost-like conditions here in Western North Carolina this weekend. It's something we deal with a lot here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Typically a frost doesn't damage a Japanese maple too badly. You have to be careful with it on our younger plants. Definitely check out our full video on how to protect your Japanese maple from a frost.
And always keep in mind, people always say, well, the rest of my trees in my garden aren't doing this, and there's one 5 feet away. Well, think about this too in terms of your car. How many times do you get in your car and you've got frost on your front windshield but not on your back? And that's what happens, is certain areas of your yard can get frost, even though they're very similar based on wind and sunlight. And so it's always something to keep in mind that it very easily can be frost. Don't always rule that out. Everyone always goes quickly to rule that out because they say, well, this is one of the few things in my garden that's got damaged. Well, maybe one of the few places in your garden that got frost.
So the bonus one and those first two are things that are easy to fix. They're things that are going to be easy to alleviate. Number 3, you want to watch out for it, and we'll go through some steps for what to do after you've seen it. Verticillium wilt can be number 3. Now, it's going to be a little bit more distinguishable. Your trees are going to look very droopy. It's going to look like the leaves are almost falling off the plant. So the leaves are going to look almost sideways. They're not going to look quite irregular. They're definitely not going to look like that unfurling stage. If you're familiar with that unfurling stage, it's going to be very, very different from that.
It will look like your plant is melting rather than leafing out. And that's really the best way to describe it in my book, is it looks like all the leaves are just sort of melting because they don't have the energy and resources coming to them from the roots.
Now, we put this one at 3 because it's typically the least common of the two. The most common being water. The most common, honestly, is that bonus one, is that it's normal and that's how it's naturally leafing out. But then the most common thing we see is too much water, followed by a frost, and then followed by actual verticillium. So don't freak out if you think, hey, this is verticillium. Go through those other stages first. Check to make sure your water's right. Does it look like a natural leaf? Is it been hit recently by an extreme cold change or frost? And those could be factors before. Now, if you do have verticillium, there's some stages you want to take.
Yeah, and with frost looks like a little bit burn on the leaves. The verticillium looks like the whole plant's melting. I mean, that's typically what it is, unless it's a cold snap. If you have a cold snap you know, that's even much colder than a frost, it may look more melting as well. But steps you want to take, number one, move that plant. If you've got plant that you suspect of verticillium, move it away from all the others. Go ahead and quarantine that plant first off, right, Matt?
Check for all the other stages first. Make sure the drainage is good, but go ahead and quarantine that plant. There's honestly not a lot that can be done with verticillium. It is typically a bad diagnosis for a Japanese maple. There's tons of people that tell you different things you can do, and you may be able to treat with something like subdue or some different different things that will clean up that xylem flow. But honestly, in general, once you're already seeing that kind of thing in a Japanese maple, it's a little too far along to fix.
Yeah, and best thing to do, if you want to give it a shot anyways, quarantine it. Then once it's drop leaf, give it some liquid Miracle Grow, and that's a good way to help, because if it's truly verticillium, it's not going to relief back out. If it's one of these other situations, if it was too much water, too little water, as long as you let it dry out and then you water it again with Miracle Grow, that's going to hopefully start pushing new leaves and pushing new energy, because that plant's going to have some sort of energy left in that plant.
So no matter what, if you see this happening, there's some stages you can take. If you have a young tree in a container, get it in some shade. Make sure it's not staying in too much water. Make sure it doesn't have a tray underneath it holding water. That's literally the most common reason why your leaves are drooping, are that it's sitting under a tray. You know, a little saucer is underneath your pot, and it's keeping water around that root, and it's going to set up some root rot and shut the plant down long term. And drooping foliage can be your first indicator that something's going wrong on that water amount.
I'm going to throw one more reason why your leaves may be drooping, and it's not really an indicator for the spring typically. It starts more in June, is weed killer. I mean, we see all the time, as soon as summer hits, people hitting their plants with weed killer, or putting it out at the wrong time of the season, like when it's real windy, or putting it out when it's too much high heat, and they're getting drift on their Japanese maples and starting to cause drooping leaves. Again, that's another thing, very much like this verticillium, where once it hits, it's hard to get that tree to respond back, because you've essentially weed killed your Japanese maple.
Hey, we hope this has given you some confidence in growing Japanese maples, helps you better identify some of the things that can go wrong. I would definitely go through those stages first. You know, definitely look for the water first. That's the easiest thing that can go wrong. Look at what foliage looks like leafing out naturally. If you can identify that, you're already ahead of the game, because you'll know what it looks like when something's going wrong. First, look for water and drainage. Make sure it's not in too much sun, and then move on to some of those more serious steps, like, have we had a recent frost? Is it damage from that, or is it verticillium?
We greatly appreciate you watching this video. I really hope this gives you more confidence in gardening and understanding when you see drooping leaves, being able to diagnose it and then take the corrective actions.
God bless.
And have a great day.